Welcome to Granada, a captivating gem nestled in the heart of Spain. Join us on a journey through this enchanting city as we uncover its rich history, explore stunning architectural marvels like the Alhambra, and indulge in delicious tapas. Let's discover the magic of Granada together. Hola, ¿qué tal? Hello, I am Tony from Road Trip Spain and Portugal, where we help you plan the perfect trip with practical information and insider tips. In this video, we'll try to explain why Granada is a must-see destination in Spain. With its awe-inspiring Alhambra Palace, the narrow streets of the Albaicín district, and the stunning Sierra Nevada mountains as a backdrop, Granada offers a perfect blend of history, culture and natural beauty. We'll see where it is and how to get to Granada, we'll talk about the places you shouldn't miss, and we'll talk about tapas in Granada. We'll finish by talking about how many days to spend in the city. In the description of the video, as usual, you will find links to all the places we mentioned. Granada is in the region of Andalusia in the southern half of Spain, not far from the sea. Getting to Granada requires some degree of effort. Returning to the general map of the Iberian Peninsula, if you want to get to Granada, in our opinion, your best options are a high-speed train from Barcelona, Madrid, Córdoba, a flight from Barcelona or Madrid, and a regular train from Málaga or Seville. The first part of Granada you should visit is its Centro Histórico, its historic center. It is quite compact and contains several places you should know. A large monumental doorway leads into the former Alhóndiga Yedida, whose name was changed by the Catholic monarchs when they conquered Granada, becoming known as the Corral del Carbón. The Alhóndiga was a public building that served as a meeting point for traders. The doorway, which is the most prominent part of the Corral del Carbón, is formed by a large horseshoe arch, typical of Muslim architecture. In the center of the courtyard there is a small fountain with two spouts from which, according to legend, water from the Darro and Genil rivers would flow. The Palacio de la Madraza, the Madrasa Palace, is a building with a very interesting history. The term Madrasa means school in Arabic, and the palace was the seat of Granada's first university, founded in 1349 at the time of the Arab presence in the Iberian Peninsula. When the Catholic monarchs conquered Granada in 1492, it was agreed that the Madrasa would continue to function as a center of learning. But in 1499, the policy of tolerance towards the Muslims who had remained in Granada changed, and the madrasa was closed. The present building dates from the 18th century, when a new architectural project was carried out that preserved the original Arabic oratory. The Palacio de la Madraza now belongs to the University of Granada and is the headquarters of the university's cultural center. During the visit you will see the magnificent 14th century Moorish oratory with a dome of indescribable beauty, and the main hall of the town hall with a magnificent mudéjar covered ceiling. Mudéjar was the artistic style carried out by the Arab craftsmen who remained in Spain after the expulsion of the Arabs. The Lonja de Mercaderes is a space built in 1518 to be used as a meeting point for traders. When the project was announced, it met with opposition from those in charge of the Royal Chapel, who feared that the activity of the merchants would end up interfering with worship. The compromise that was reached was to allocate the first floor of the Lonja de Mercaderes for the exclusive use of the Royal Chapel. Its facade is a good example of the Plateresque style, in which Gothic and Renaissance elements are combined. The Capilla Real, the Royal Chapel of Granada, is a very important funerary monument in the history of Spain. It is the final resting place of the Reyes Católicos, the Catholic monarchs. Isabella I of Castile and Ferdinand II of Aragon ordered the construction of the Royal Chapel in 1504 with the aim of making it the final resting place for their bodies. The kings died before the project was completed and their bodies remained in the the Alhambra until 1521, when their grandson Emperor Charles V ordered the bodies to be moved to the chapel that had just been completed. The Catholic monarchs rest in a grandiose tomb built in Genoa, Italy, using Carrara marble. Photographs are not allowed inside the royal chapel, and for that reason we are showing you pictures from the official website. The Alcaceria, the old Arab silk souk, is a good place to buy handicrafts and all kinds of souvenirs of Granada. It is a small labyrinth of narrow streets occupied by shops selling typical handicrafts and souvenirs. 9 gates, closed at night for security, gave access to the market. In addition to this silk trade, silverware, clothing and other delicate products were sold in the Alcaceria. With the decline of silk production in the 18th century, the market gradually lost its original character. On the arches and facades of the buildings you can see many details typical of Moorish art. In the heart of the historic center of Granada is one of the most important squares in the city, the Plaza Bib Rambla. It is of Arab origin and its name was inherited from the Bab al-Rambla gate in the old city wall. During the time of the Moorish presence in Granada, the square was the scene of celebrations. Later, after the Christian conquest, it was used for bullfights and also for the burning of books condemned by the Inquisition. It was precisely in this square that the contents of the library of the Madrasa, the Arab university mentioned earlier, were burned. In the square there are several stalls selling flowers, which is why it is also known as the Plaza de las Flores, Flower Square. Nestled among the narrow streets of the city center, the Cathedral of Granada is one of the most outstanding examples of the Spanish Renaissance. After the conquest of Granada by the Catholic monarchs, Queen Isabella ordered the construction of a cathedral on the site of the Great Mosque of Granada. Work began in 1523, directed by the Gothic master Enrique Egas, who died 5 years later. He was replaced by Diego de Siloé, a Spanish artist trained in Italy. Diego de Siloé achieved the feat of erecting a Renaissance temple on the Gothic design and foundations of Egas. The cathedral was completed 60 years later, in 1583. The main facade is majestic, the work of local artist Alonso Cano. Lack of resources and the death of Alonso Cano left the cathedral with only one tower. The second tower foreseen in the project was never erected. As you will see on the map, all the basic sites in the historic center of Granada are really close to each other. The Albaicín was the neighborhood that formed, together with the palace complex of the Alhambra, the heart of Muslim Granada. It is one of the old Arab quarters of Granada. It extends along the side of a hill in Granada, well in front of the Alhambra. It is characterized by narrow streets, white painted houses, and many interior gardens and courtyards. In 1984, it was declared a UNESCO World Heritage Site in recognition of the rich collection of Moorish architecture blended harmoniously with the traditional architecture of Andalusia, and also for being an exceptional example of a vanished civilization. At the time of the Arab presence in Granada, the Albaicín had 40,000 inhabitants and 30 mosques. The Albaicín today maintains the urban layout of the Nasrid period, which was the last Arab dynasty to rule Granada. Visiting the Albaicín is a delight, but as the neighborhood is on the side of a hill, it can pose some challenges for people with mobility restrictions. For these people, there is an alternative that we recommend. Take the local minibus up to the Mirador de San Nicolas and from that high point, walk back down to the center of Granada. That way, you eliminate the uphill part of the route and get to know the neighborhood on the way down. The bus, which you take from the Plaza Nueva, is very small and it couldn't be any other way as it travels through very narrow streets. In fact, through some incredibly narrow streets where you won't believe that a minibus can go. But if you don't have any mobility problems, the most charming way to get to know the neighborhood is to walk without a doubt. We're now going to tell you about some of the places you should not miss when you visit the Albaicin. One of the entry points to the neighborhood is the Plaza Nueva, created after the conquest of Granada by the Catholic monarchs. It is a completely different urban space from the Moorish Granada, with palaces and buildings in the style of the Christian conquerors. Following the Plaza Nueva, you will enter the Santa Ana Square. The square has two outstanding elements. On the right, you will see the Plaza Nueva fountain, one of the most beautiful fountains in Granada, built of grey stone. And right in front of you, the church of Santa Ana and San Gil, in the space formerly occupied by a mosque. The church tower, in fact, corresponds to the minaret of the old mosque. The Carrera del Darro is the main artery that connects the historic center of Granada with the Albaicín. The street, at times very narrow, follows the course of the river Darro under the gaze of the imposing Alhambra. Along the Carrera del Darro, you will see palaces, churches, convents, and Moorish houses that bear witness to Granada's rich history. El Bañuelo contains the remains of a hammam, the Arab public baths, from the 11th century. It is one of the oldest architectural remains of Muslim Granada and was declared a national monument in 1918. It is in a very good state of preservation and is considered to be the best preserved Arab public bath in Spain. The different spaces of the hammam are covered by brick vaults with beautiful star-shaped skylights that create a magical play of light inside. Casa de Zafra and Casa de Horno de Oro are two houses that provide an excellent and well-preserved example of Hispanic Muslim houses from the 14th and 15th centuries. The buildings combine Islamic architectural styles with those of Castilian culture. In the center of the house is a rectangular courtyard with a small pond in the middle, typical of Arab houses. The arches that surround the courtyard follow the tradition of Nasrid architecture. As we mentioned earlier in the video, the Nasrids were the last Muslim dynasty in Granada until its conquest by the Catholic monarchs. The Casa de Zafra is also home to the Albaicin Interpretation Center, which allows visitors to learn more about the neighborhood. Arco de las Pesas is the popular name given to the Puerta de las Pesas or Puerta Nueva. It was one of the points that allowed the crossing of the wall that separated the Albaicin from the Alcazaba Kadima. The gate is in the shape of an elbow, which is very typical of Muslim defensive architecture. This arrangement of the gate made it difficult for invaders to advance and facilitated defense. The Palace of Dar al-Orra is a Nasrid palace built in the 15th century. The palace was the home of Aisha, a famous Arab queen of Granada. She was the mother of Boabdil, who ruled Granada until its conquest by the Catholic monarchs. Today you can walk around these two floors contemplating a building that has largely preserved its original features. The Mirador de la Lona is one of the viewpoints in the Albaicin overlooking the city center. The name of the viewpoint refers to a canvas factory for the navy that used to be on the site and which has since disappeared. From here you can enjoy a panoramic view of the center of Granada. The Mirador de San Nicolás, the San Nicolás viewpoint, apart from being the best known viewpoint in Granada, is one of the most magical places in the city. It affords one of the most spectacular panoramic views of the grandiose Alhambra, with the Generalife on the left, the Nasrid palaces and the Palace of Charles V in the middle, and the Alcazaba on the right. As a backdrop, the mountains that form the Sierra Nevada. The Mirador de San Nicolás is a popular spot at any time of the day. It's tourists, locals, vendors, it's crazy. At peak tourist times, there is always a group singing live flamenco. The viewpoint is especially crowded in the late afternoon because going up to watch the sunset is one of the most beautiful experiences you can have in Granada. Be careful because along with the masses of tourists, there are also pickpockets, always on the lookout for the slightless carelessness. And another tip, if the viewpoint is overcrowded, there is another viewpoint outside the neighboring Great Mosque of Granada with identical views, which is usually not so crowded. Access to the mosque is free. The sight of the Alhambra lit at the end of the day is hard to forget. Calle de las Teterías, the tea room street, connects the Albaicín with the center of Granada. Officially called the Calle Calderería Nueva, it allows you to immerse yourself in the most Moorish Granada. It has an unmistakable air of a Moroccan souk. Before going down the street, take a look at the floor made of small stones that, among other figures, form pomegranates, granadas, the fruit that gives the city its name. In the past, the Calderería Nueva was the site of workshops that produced all kinds of handcrafted items, including the cauldrons that give the street its name today. There are no longer any reminders of that past, and today you will find on both sides of the street shops selling a variety of souvenirs for tourists, tea shops and pastry shops selling typical Arab sweets. The tea shops are the reason for the popular name of the street. Step into one of them, the interior is usually very pretty, and tasting a Moroccan tea in Granada's most Arab quarter is a delightful experience in the city. Our tour through Granada must necessarily end with one of the most extraordinary places in the city. The Alhambra is located on top of the hill of Al-Sabica, at a strategic point overlooking the entire city and the riverside. The palace city is surrounded by walls and has an irregular shape. The Alhambra complex is very extensive, and to better understand the different parts of it, let's take a quick look at it. You will enter the Alhambra through the building where the ticket office is, and from there you will gain access to the main areas of the complex, which are the Generalife, the Palace of Charles V, the Alcazaba, and the Nasrid palaces. As we will explain shortly, we suggest you visit the complex in the order we have just shown. The first historical documents about the Alhambra date back to the 9th century, but it was not until the arrival of Muhammad I in the 13th century, the first monarch of the Nasrid dynasty, the last Muslim dynasty to rule Granada, that the royal residence was finally established in the Alhambra. And this move marked the beginning of the Alhambra's most glorious period. After the conquest of Granada, Charles V had part of the complex demolished to build the palace that today bears his name, a form of affirmation of the superiority of the Christian monarchs over the Muslim sultans. From the 18th century onwards, the Alhambra was abandoned. In 1984, UNESCO declared the Alhambra a World Heritage Site because it is an exceptional witness to Muslim Spain between the 13th and 15th centuries, and because it is the best example we have of Nasrid art. Here's how we suggest you visit the Alhambra. The first place you should go to is the Generalife. The palace and gardens of the Generalife occupy the side of a hill overlooking the city and also the Alhambra. The Generalife became a resting place for the sultans of Granada when they wanted to get away from official palace business. Despite its proximity to the Alhambra and the fact that today it is visited as a single monument, the Generalife was not considered part of the city palace. Unlike other parts of the Alhambra, the buildings of the Generalife are solid but poor and rather simple. All this seems to suggest an intimate and tranquil atmosphere, which was what the sultans were looking for when they retired to the Generalife to rest. Having finished the visit to the Generalife, you will head to the Alhambra proper. The entrance to the city palace of the Alhambra is through a bridge that leads to the wall. Always follow the signs indicating the way to the Palace of Charles V and the Nasrid palaces. After a short while, you will see the exterior of the majestic Palace of Charles V. The Palacios Nazaríes, the Nasrid palaces, which we will talk about in a moment, were the summer residence of Emperor Charles V and his family, but as Holy Roman Emperor, Charles needed a place that would offer him the comfort he did not have in the Nasrid palaces. For this reason, he had a palace built close to the Moorish palaces so that he could continue to enjoy the beauty of the place. In addition to this, the choice of the site where the new palace was to be built had to symbolize the triumph of Christianity Christianity over Islam. For this, it was essential to maintain the old Arab constructions so that they could be compared with the weight of power behind the classical project of the new palace. The only decorated facades of the palace are the south and west facades, which you will see as you walk around the area. The north and east facades are connected to the Nasrid palaces. The palace is the most important building of the Renaissance style in Spain, and its inner circular courtyard is unique. It has 2 floors. The acoustics inside are wonderful. Part of the ground floor of the palace is occupied by the Alhambra Museum. The entrance is on the right as you enter the palace. Admission is free. Be sure to visit the museum. Its content is extraordinary. Many people who went to the Alhambra never entered the museum, which is a real pity. And now we go to the Alcazaba. The Nasrid palaces are right next to the Palace of Charles V, but we are going to leave them for the last moment of the visit as they are the most extraordinary place in the complex. Let's go to the Alcazaba first. The present complex was the work of Mohammed I when the Alcazaba became a real fortress as the Sultan took up residence there. When the Catholic monarchs took Granada, they carried out many repairs to the Alcazaba. Like other parts of the Alhambra, the fortress was abandoned for many centuries. It was only in the late 19th and early 20th century that work began on its restorations. The entrance to the Alcazaba is through the lower part of the keep. The gate will lead you to the Plaza de Armas, a space dedicated to military parades in peacetime and to the establishment of a defensive strategy during battles. At the end of the square to the east, you will see the Torre de la Vela, which was the main defensive tower of the Alcazaba. Be sure to go up to the terrace. The views from the top are marvelous. Don't miss the various defensive towers inside the Alcazaba facing the Albaicín, which offer equally spectacular views. And now it's time to end the visit to the Alhambra with a tour of the Nasrid palaces. Of all the spaces that can be visited in the Alhambra, it is the only one that requires you to book a specific time slot. And as they are the most extraordinary place in the Alhambra, our recommendation is that you leave the visit until the end. The complex known as the Nasrid Palaces is actually made up of 3 separate areas. Firstly, the Mexuar, which corresponds to the semi-public area of the palace, a place for the administration of justice and the handling of the affairs of the state. Secondly, the Palace of Comares, which was the official residence of the Sultan. And thirdly, the Palace of the Lions, private part of the palace where the harem was located. The visit to the palaces is easy to complete. There is only one entrance and one exit for each palace. All you have to do is follow the signs indicating the way. Leaving the palaces, you will enter a part of the complex known as El Partal. During the Moorish presence, there were many buildings here which belonged to the magnates who lived around the Nasrid palaces. The portico, with its 5 arches, has a pond in front of it. Let's share some tips about the tickets to visit the Alhambra. First tip, buy your tickets for the Alhambra only and exclusively on the official website of the Patronato de la Alhambra. We're going to put the link in the description of the video. Do not buy your tickets anywhere else. Second tip, there are several types of tickets for sale. When you buy yours, the most important thing is to make sure that it includes the visit to the Nasrid palaces, because not all of them do. We recommend you buy either the ticket known as Alhambra General or the ticket known as the Dobla de Oro General. When you buy your ticket, you will have to choose the day of your visit to the Alhambra and the time slot for entry to the Nasrid Palaces. The entry time to the Nasrid Palaces is controlled and you are obliged to enter at the reserved time. The other areas of the Alhambra can be visited on the same day as the Nasrid Palaces without any time restrictions. A piece of advice which we have already mentioned in the video: as the Nasrid Palaces are the most incredible place in the Alhambra, we recommend that you leave them for the end of your visit. And finally, a priceless piece of advice: buy your ticket to visit the Alhambra as soon as you know the date of your stay in Granada. Tickets to visit the Alhambra sell out weeks, or depending on the time of the year, months in advance. You can also visit the Nasrid Palaces at night by buying the ticket Night Visit to Nasrid Palaces. We have already made this visit and in our experience it is not worth it, and we would only recommend it to those who have already visited the Alhambra by day several times and are curious to see it by night. The night visit is something of a massive disappointment. It is very easy to get to the Alhambra. Leaving from the center of Granada, you can walk up to the monument, but we think it is a great waste of time as you are going to walk inside the monument enough to have to do it beforehand as well. So our advice is to go up to the Alhambra by bus. There is a local bus going to the Alhambra departing from near Plaza de Isabel la Católica in the center of Granada. Ask wherever you are staying where the nearest stop is. You must have already realized, because we have mentioned it several times, that the Alhambra complex is very extensive with many fascinating places to visit. Allow a minimum of 3 hours to complete an accelerated visit, but you could easily spend 5 hours or even a full day given the beauty of the places you are going to visit. It all depends on how much time you have set aside for Granada. A video on what to do in Granada cannot fail to mention a local tradition known throughout Spain. Tapas in Granada are serious business. As it is the case in a handful of other cities in Spain, tradition dictates that in Granada, when you order a drink, it comes with a complimentary tapa, a small side dish. In most bars, the waiter chooses the tapa to be served, which depends very much on what is coming out of the kitchen at the time. In some bars, you can choose your tapa from a list. With 3 drinks and 3 complimentary tapas, you have eaten very cheaply in Granada. Final food tip: the typical sweet from Granada is known as piononos. I love them. Cecilia, not so much. You will find them everywhere in Granada. How many days you should spend in Granada? Our advice is quite simple: dedicate at least 2 full days to Granada, which means 3 nights in the city. That is the time you will need to visit the Alhambra, the Albaicín, and the historic center of the city. And that's the end of our video on Granada, one of the most extraordinary destinations in Spain. If you have any questions about Granada, use the commentary box to ask. And since you are heading to Granada, you will definitely want to check out Seville too. We've recorded a video in which we try to convey to you all our passion for Seville, and we are already waiting for you in that video.